Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 4 of the Restore Her Summer Enlightenment Summit. I'm Cheryl Lacey Donna, the CEO and founder of Restore Her, and we are glad that you have decided to join us here for the 4th day of the Restore Her Summit. It has truly been amazing. We've heard some awesome women of God talk about things like restore her passion, restore her wealth, and restore her identity. And if you haven't found out anything about what the Restore Her movement is doing in this time, we are looking at restore her identity, restoring spirit and soul, restoring passion, restoring purpose, restoring health, restoring wealth, restoring emotions, restoring relationships. And these are the types of things that we're trying to help women and anybody in general in the kingdom to get to a place where they feel that restoration, where they feel empowered, where they no longer succumb to the spirit of fear, where they move forward in the things that God has already ordained for their lives and manifest some of those things in their lives so that they can enlarge their territory. And tonight we are excited to have with us Lyvonne Copeland. Lyvonne is going to be coming to us in her own way to talk about Restore Her Spirit. Lyvonne, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for having me. I'm super excited. And as you said, it has been a great 4 nights so far. It has been wonderful. So I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, listen, I'm getting out of the way. It's not about me. I'm moving out of the way, and you're going to get ready to come to the people in the way that you have already been purposed to do. This is Lyvonne Copeland. Restore her soul and spirit.
Hello, ladies. Hello. And thank you so much for joining in tonight for day 4 of Restore Her Summer Enlightenment Summit. I am super excited to be before you. As Cheryl said, I am Lyvonne Copeland and I am a self-reliance strategist. And my goal is to help women that have gotten a lot on their plate. They're wearing many hats and they want to get back to that place where they reconnect with who they are and whose they are. And so I love this topic of restoring her soul and her spirit. And so tonight I'm going to give you some keys on how you can help restore your soul. But first, we're going to talk about exactly what that is, why we must restore our soul, and how we're going to do that. And I'm going to give you some keys that will help you unlock that door, that's going to help you to see how you can restore your soul. So first of all, we're going to talk about the what. And so tonight, for those of you all that are taking notes, thank you for joining in. Thank you for hitting those thumbs up. Thank you for the questions and the comments. And for those that will come back and watch the replay, I thank you as well. So tonight, if you're taking notes, you can put down on your paper the title for tonight's Restore Her Soul segment is A Healing for Her Soul. Don't diffuse the flame. And so when we talk about a healing for her soul, we're going to talk about what that is. So when we first look at that, we have to talk about exactly what is the soul, what is the spirit, exactly what is that. So if you look at the definition of soul, it tells you that that is defined as the spiritual or the immaterial part of us, which means in layman's term, that is that part that can't be seen, that part that can't be touched. It is that part that is not a part of this physical. That's your soul. And it's something very special about that. And that's why we have to really work on restoring that. And then the second part of that we need to think about, we're going to be focusing on is that flame. When we were thinking about restoring that soul is that flame. And see, a flame is what fuels our passion and it was fuels our purpose. So the reason why you must restore that soul, because that is what stirs up those gifts. That's what stirs up those passions. That is what stirs your purpose. That is why we have to focus on that. Why we must restore her soul also is because you think about it. Your soul was here before we were born. That was in existence before we existed in the physical. And it's that thing that once we leave this earth, it remains, because that's the one part of us that can be eternal. And we know we can either that soul spends its eternity is based on how we move and what we do while we're here on this earth. So the reason why we have to make sure that that soul is restored, because that is the essence of us, of who we was, who we are, and who we will become. And your soul is the foundation of everything that makes you you. No one, you think about it, no one can see it. You think, you can't say I see someone's soul. We don't see it, we can't put our hands on it, in a tangible way to touch it. We can't hear it, we can't smell it. There's nothing. That's why it's defined as that immaterial part of us, because it's nothing that's here in the physical. It doesn't have a physical form. These physical bodies house that spirit that is in us. And so something happens sometimes in life. We become distracted. We get off course. Sometimes life itself throws us a curveball, and our soul, that flame, sometimes begins to flicker, because life can send those distractions that are just like puffs of wind, that are trying to snuff out, that are trying to diffuse or neutralize that flame. And the key to us making sure that we don't allow that to happen is getting back to that place of intimacy. So, the what, we talked about our soul, what it is. We talked about that flame, what it is, and the reason why we must be in this place where we're going to restore our soul. We talked about the why, because it is that place that when it is touched, when we allow someone or something to touch our soul, we make ourselves available or vulnerable to that place where someone can come in and get to know that part of us. It's an intimate relationship. It's one of those things that we have to guard and we have to protect, because something happens sometimes in life. And I think, ladies, we can be quite frank. Most of the time, when we think about that intimate place, having intimacy, most of the time people think about sex. That is what intimacy relates to. But what happens when we learn to be intimate with ourselves and to restore that part that no one ever sees? Because see, that place, our soul, when we allow someone there and it is touched or it is abused, it's one of those things that can really break us or make us. So we're going to talk about how do we get to that place where we can truly allow her to restore her spirit and restore her soul during this summer enlightenment series. So we want to look at how can we do that. Well, first, before you can get ready to restore, you have to have a conversation. There has to be a lot, sort of a coming to Jesus meeting with ourselves. We have to have a conversation before there can be a connection. You think about it, when we think about intimacy, we think about, most of the times we hear intimacy, we think about sex. But you think about sex, before sex, there has to be some type of communication before the encounter. So it's the same way when we look at intimacy as it relates to restoring our soul, is that we have to have a level of communication before there's truly an encounter. We have to be able to first define exactly what intimacy looks like for us. What is intimacy as it relates to our spirit? What is intimacy with God? So we're going to look at 4 areas of intimacy. When you think about intimacy in its defined state, intimacy is defined as close familiarity, friendship, or closeness. So think about this, and I'm going to use this as an example. You have been in a relationship, say months or years, and during that course, you think about in the beginning stages, you're talking on the phone, you're texting, you're FaceTiming. We're building up a foundation where we feel like I can begin to give you a little more of myself. You start with the conversation. It starts with usually a, hey, how you doing? My name is. And you build on that, and you begin to learn a little bit about each other, and you begin to learn what you like and what they like and what we don't like. You begin to learn things, what they don't settle for, their morals. You get to experience, get to truly know their character. Most of the time, so we think. but we begin to get to that place where we feel that we know that person. And you, as you talk to them, the more you talk to them, the more you will begin to find out, I can feel comfortable. I can trust them, because the more you talk with that person, you realize, okay, no one's coming back to me telling me everything that I've said. They're not using my words against me. They're not taking my words and twisting them. So I begin to develop a level of trust. And then from that place of trust, we begin to be more vulnerable. And we don't mind at that place, whether it's spiritually or even in the physical, we don't mind being naked before that person. So as we talk about intimacy as it relates to restoring her soul, I want you to keep that in mind, because for a lot of us, when it comes time to restore her, we forget to be intimate with her. We forget to be intimate with her. We will have the conversations with other people. We will build a foundation with others and build relationships. But a lot of times we neglect to do that with ourselves. We neglect to have that conversation before we have the encounter. Y'all get that? So we're going to look at 4 areas of intimacy. So I hope you all brought your pens and paper. I am a true teacher at heart. So I love to say, bring your pens and paper if you come in to sit in the class with me, because I want to give you some notes and some nuggets that you can take back and you can begin to allow those things to marinate. So when we look at the 4 levels of intimacy, 4 areas of intimacy for tonight's teaching and training, we're going to be looking at the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. Again, that's our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. So we're looking at these 4 areas of intimacy, and we're going to relate them to restoring her. So the first, and I always say spiritual, because that's tied to your soul. That is the foundation. That is where you're going to build the foundation that the emotional, the mental, and the physical will be able to take root and plant. So you may ask, what is spiritual intimacy? Now, spiritual intimacy for us is going to be that relationship with God. So we're talking about building her soul, but see, there's something we must understand, is that our soul, our spirit is divinely connected to God. Because you think about it, God is spirit. We have to worship him in spirit and in truth. Our relationship, we know that we are truly spiritual beings in a physical world. So we have to get back to that place where we are building a relationship with God. So that first element of spiritual restoration for restoring her soul has to be that relationship with God. So you begin with the conversation. I told you, it always going to have to start with the conversation before the encounter. See, there has to be a conversation. You think about, even with God, you think when he wants to have an encounter with us, it's always preceded by a sound. It's preceded by a conversation. Example, take Mary, the mother of Jesus. Before she had an encounter with God, where she was impregnated with the son of God, with Jesus, there was a conversation, because she was visited by an angel that told her what was to come. There was conversation before there was an encounter. Think about Paul on the road to Damascus. Think about Moses, even before his encounter with God, where he saw God in that burning bush. Think about, there had been conversations that had built the relationship. He had a conversation when God was telling him, Moses, I want you to go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. I want you to lead my people into the promised land. I want you to lead them out of Exodus. I want you to lead them into the promised land. God had had numerous conversations with Moses, even before he had that encounter where he allowed the bush to burn before him and he allowed God's glory to shine upon him. So for us to build, restore her soul, the spirit, and build on that intimacy, we have to start with the conversation in the spirit. So we have to allow our spirits to connect with God. And you may ask, well, how do I build that spiritual relationship? You have to get in God's word. You have to get before God. You have to make yourself vulnerable. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be flowery. You don't have to be hyped up. It doesn't have to be all that holier than thou communication. God wants us to have a dialogue with him. The same way I'm talking with you all, the same way I talk with my husband, the same way I talk and communicate with my kids, I can have that same level of conversation with God and just say, you know what, God, I'm tired. You know, I'm running in circles. I'm trying to please everybody. You know, I'm not. You could just say, God, I'm not happy. God, I don't even know where to begin. And there's something that is so beautiful and magnificent about that is that you can come before God and just say, God, I don't even know what to say. And the beautiful thing about that is that you can just close your eyes and you can just be quiet and silent and allow your heart to speak to God. Allow your spirit to speak on your behalf. That's the beautiful thing about that spiritual level of intimacy, is that sometimes you don't have to say a thing, but there's a full conversation taking place. Because your spirit, when you get to that place where you say, God, I'm just going to bring my spirit, bring myself to you. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. God, I don't even know where to begin. All I know is that something's not right and I need you. And just be quiet. Go silent. I'm one of those people, I like to sometimes just sit in the dark and allow your spirit to have that conversation. See, that conversation is what prepares you for the encounter. So that was the first level of intimacy, is the spiritual. And all of this is all you think all I'm doing is showing you how to restore your soul through intimacy. Because see, we all have been in that place where we need a healing for our soul. Because of course we've dated someone that just didn't treat us right, and we loved them with all our heart and with our soul. We allowed them into that intimate place where really just us and God go dwell, and we allowed them there, and they may have betrayed us and they hurt us and they broke a part of that spirit of us. So we've all been there, but we can learn from that, and we can heal that part of our soul, because that soul is so vital to our purpose and our passion. So first step was having that spiritual connection that starts with the conversation with God. That's how you build your spiritual intimacy. And see, something happens when you begin to build that spiritual intimacy. These things you're going to see, they're just going to begin to overlap and begin to just mesh and transition into the next one. As you build that spiritual intimacy, that spiritual part of her, see, then your emotions, you're going to get to the place where you're comfortable with God. You're going to be in that place where you trust God, because you've allowed him into your heart, and he's allowed you to feel that you can trust me. I got you. Because as his word says, once he forgives you of your sin, they are as far from the east as to the west. He's thrown those in the sea of forgetfulness, never to be brought back up in your face like some people may do. He won't be throwing them back up and say, oh, but I remember when you did this. I remember when you was a prostitute. I remember when you used to drink. I remember when you was addicted to drugs. See, other people will bring up your past, but not with God. Because once you have that spiritual connection, He helps you to see you can trust me with that most intimate part of you. Those parts that are sometimes shuns us, that we feel ashamed of. And see, once we get that, we become emotionally vulnerable to God. Because we understand I don't have anything else to lose. I can stand naked before him. He knows all the intimate parts of me. See, that scripture begins to take root in us because we understand that he knows the intimate parts. He knitted us in our mother's womb. So before we were born, he had already knew what we were going to do. So he knew we were going to mess up. He knew we were going to make some mistakes. He knew we would fail, but he knew that we could get back up again. So we began to become emotionally vulnerable to him. That's when you begin to recognize your pains and your weaknesses, but you also recognize your strengths. And if I could be quite frank with you, that's when you begin to own your own stuff. Because you could be like, you know what? Can't nobody hold this against me because I can own who I am. I can own that. Yeah, I did that. I did. You can't hold over me what I own. And see, that's that area. Some of us, we don't make that transition when we have that intimate encounter with God, but emotionally, we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. You have to allow yourself to be emotionally vulnerable because when you can do that, he gives you emotional strength so that no one can hold over you your past, your mistakes, your shortfalls, your weaknesses. No one can hold that because you can own that. Yep, I did that. Sure did. Got the shirt, the hat, and the banner. I did it. And when you can own your stuff, can't nobody hold that over your head. So now you're even more stronger. And that's where you begin mentally. It's amazing how these things just begin to roll together. Because as you become emotionally strengthened through his words, through that vulnerability, your mindset begins to shift. So mentally, your mental intimacy with God becomes him whispering, giving you sweet thoughts and dreams. He begins to remind you, you're fearfully and wonderfully made in my image. Greater works can you do. Greater works. No one can hold over you what you've done. I can use that and I can get the glory from it. I can use that and let that trial become your triumph. I can allow those pains that you went through, allow them to birth and push you into your purpose. See, then you begin to have those conversations with yourself. Mentally, you become stronger. Mentally, you become wiser. And then you know what happens? Because what the mind thinks, the mouth begins to speak. And see, when the mouth begins to speak, there's a manifestation that begins to happen in the physical. So physically, we begin to have an intimate relationship with God because we begin to use our bodies for his glory. We begin to put our feet to the allow our feet to the pedal. We begin to use our hands for his works. We begin to use our mouths to proclaim his words. We begin to write visions and make them plain. We begin to speak things into existence, those things that are not as though they are. We begin to then use the physical because the mind is in order. And once we get those things in our mind, we get those things in our heart. See, that's when it gets to the physical. It takes root in our heart. It takes root in our mouth because we begin to speak it. We begin to put our hands to work. We begin to put our feet to the pavement, and we begin to be about our Father's business. And her soul is restored. Her soul is refreshed. Her soul is renewed. And it goes back to starting with that conversation, allowing God to talk to you so he can teach you the words to speak to yourself. That's our soul, and our spirit is such an intimate, it's such a unique, and it's such a beautiful creation by God. See, I always look at it this way, is that our bodies are the physical. When we read back in Genesis, it said, we, God, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, it said, let us make man in our image. And that's what he did with his hands. He created the physical and created and made us in his image. But see, we still didn't have life. It wasn't until he began to breathe in us. And see, knowing that God is spirit, we know that when he breathed in us, that Zoe breath, he breathed his spirit into us. And that's where we took on our spiritual being. And we began our time here in creation from his breath. So if you want to be able to restore your soul, you have to get back to having a conversation in the spirit, your spirit with God. Get back to having a conversation deep from in. Allow him to speak to you so that you can allow your spirit to be strengthened, so that you become emotionally strong, so that you become mentally strong, and you become physically strong. Women of Restore Her, this is your season. We've been given some downtime that has allowed us to dig deeper. So I encourage you, as you're listening to this and you go back and watch the replay and go over those notes, begin to have that conversation. Begin to develop that relationship of intimacy. If you want to restore your soul, begin to build on a foundation of intimacy. Build on those four keys and watch you restore her. All right? Ladies, I hope that you have enjoyed this. I hope this has been a blessing to you.
This was amazing. It is something that we talk about frequently. The fact that it is so important to set aside time to commune with God, to set aside time to be with God and to soak in his presence. It's not enough to just get up and say your prayers really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
on your way out the door. It's not enough to just say, okay, God, this is what I want. This is how I want it. This is when I want it. This is what I want it to look like. We need to have the opportunity to spend time in his presence, like you said, an intimate relationship with him. That makes the difference. And I
It
pray
does.
that the women that have been listening tonight recognize how important that is. And I agree with you. I'll say it now, and I've said it the entire time that this has been going on. This is a time for us to reset, a time for all of those moments when we said, oh, I don't have enough time to
Mm-hmm.
do this. I don't have enough time to do that. Listen, you have had enough time during this pandemic to set aside some time intentionally. And that's the
Yes.
key, intentionally
Yes.
to be with
Yes.
God and to be in his
Exactly.
face and to be in his presence and to lay on your face and whatever it takes for you to be able to hear from him. Don't just have a monologue where you're just
Mm-hmm.
telling him what you
Mm.
want. Have a dialogue where he can
Yes.
also pour back into you and speak to you the things that he wants you to do to be able to
Exactly.
manifest the promises that he has for your life. Lyvonne, thank you so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Let everybody know how they can perhaps connect with you if they want you to speak or if they want to find out more about what you're doing.
All right. I'm Lyvonne Copeland on all my social media outlets. Exactly how you see it spelled up on your screen, Lyvonne Copeland, on Instagram, Facebook, and even my website is www.lyvonnecopeland.com. On there's links where you can connect with me, whether you're looking for someone to speak or to just connect with me as a self-reliance strategist, where you may feel like I'm at a place where I need to reconnect with who I am, because a lot of times that's why we can't have those intimate relationships, because we kind of forgot who we are. And
Yeah.
you have to understand that you are a child of God, and you are created in this image and created to do great things. So I look forward to connecting with you ladies.
Absolutely. Y'all, this is Lyvonne Copeland that's been speaking with you tonight about Restore Her Spirit and Her Soul. We want to make sure that you join us the remainder of the week. This is day 4. We have 3 more days to go in our summer 2020 Enlightenment Summit. It has truly been a blessing. We want to remind you that you can go to the website, restorehermovement.org, to find out more about what we're doing. You can also go to my website, cherylspeaks.org, to find out more about what I'm doing and what's coming up in the days to come. Today, we Restore Her decided that we're going to do on June 27th something called a Mother's Cry. A Mother's Cry, a conversation about our children and police brutality. So we're going to bring some people together to talk about that and what that looks like and what we can do as mothers to galvanize and figure out ways that we can stop the madness. You know, I don't know about anybody else, but this has been a heavy weight. And like you said, you know, getting back with God, communing with God, allowing him to speak to you. And this is one of the things that he's spoken to my spirit to do a Mother's Cry, where we're talking about and having a conversation about our children and police brutality. Lyvonne, thank you again. And we want to remind you as always that God can do exceedingly and abundantly more than you could ever ask or think, according to the power that works in you. Be blessed.
Good night.
Good night.